gusto ko makuha ang boto mo. Ganun din yung kay Pangulo. Kasi
naliligaw po kayo sa presidente?
bakit naman na lahat kayo nililigawan ko eh. Every Filipino nililigawan ko. Muslim, Kristiyano, anumang religious belief mo, it doesn't matter. If you are a voter, kung botante ka, siyempre papakisuyuan kita. Lalo pa ako, ang hirap ng laban ko. Uphill ang laban ko. Mabibigat yung mga kalaban ko. So kailangan ko lang lahat ng endorsement ng tao. That includes you, and includes you. And that includes the President. Salamat. God first. If that is the case, that everybody nowadays, God first na. So ibig sabihin, switch to Isko is real. May awa ang Diyos. May awa ang Diyos.
That was presidential aspirant Manila Mayor Isko Moreno, who remains hopeful that he could still get President Duterte's endorsement. Over the weekend, Moreno got the backing of volunteer groups who propelled Duterte to the presidency. This prompted Moreno to coin a new meaning for the term DDS as diehard Dumagoso supporters.
To be clear, the president has yet to officially declare who he is supporting. But as early as now, some of Moreno's supporters are spreading a now viral photo of Duterte allegedly making Moreno's God First sign. That, however, was done way back in March last year during a meeting with one Cebu Governor, Gwen Garcia. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. Further igniting suspicion that Moreno might actually be Duterte's anointed one are calls for Team Isa, or a tandem between Isko Moreno and Sara Duterte.
At the forefront of that pairing is the influential Mangundadatus clan of Maguindanao, who opted for Moreno instead of Inday Sara's running mate Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Romel Lopez has the big story.
A few months shy from the May 9 polls, President Rodrigo Duterte has yet to name the candidate that he's going to endorse for the presidency. But the photo of him together with Senator Bongo and Cebu Governor Gwen Garcia is now making a buzz online. The three had their index finger pointed upward, pointing to some to believe that they're making a God first sign, heavily associated to Manila Mayor Isko Moreno. This prompted some to think, is the president endorsing Moreno? For Moreno, he'll definitely take it.
If that is the case, that everybody nowadays, God first na. So ibig sabihin, switch to Isko is real. May awa ang Diyos.
But hold your horses. The photo, as it turns out, was taken March 17 last year. The sign is also believed to be referring to Garcia's One Cebu. Talks of Duterte potentially backing Moreno gained ground after a volunteer group which propelled Duterte to the presidency endorses the Manila mayor. What's more, the Mangundadatus of Maguindanao are pushing for Isa, or a tandem between Moreno and the presidential daughter Sara Duterte.
That party kay Manila Mayor Isko Moreno, our incoming president.
We supporters from Mindanao, ayun ang sinusulong namin, yung isa. At dapat magkaisa naman eh. Alam nyo, meron naman ding grupo sa Visayas na version. So isa din silang nagdadala doon kay Isko at saka Sara tandem. Kami wala kaming doon sa kung ano yung partido nila, basta ang amin dito, doon kami kay Yorme. At malinaw naman yung patakbo, malinaw yung direction niya. May angking talino.
Well, this could mean the province is abandoning his running mate Willie Ong. Moreno says he needs all the support that he could get.
Gusto ko makuha ang boto mo. Ganun din yung kay Pangulo. Kasi
naliligaw po kayo sa presidente?
bakit naman na lahat kayo nililigawan ko eh. Every Filipino nililigawan ko. Muslim, Kristiyano, anumang religious belief mo, it doesn't matter. If you are a voter, kung botante ka, siyempre papakisuyuan kita.
For News 5, Romel Lopez. We are One News.
Does an Isko Moreno-Sara Duterte tandem sit well with Acción Democrático? The party, of course, has a vice presidential candidate of its own. That big question and more with Acción Democrático's chairman, Ernest Ramel Jr. Mr. Ramel, welcome to The Big Story.
Ay, magandang gabi, Robbie, at magandang gabi sa lahat ng mga nanonood.
Diretsuhin ko na po. May kinalaman ba kayo dito sa fino-float na isa? Do you know anything about it?
Alam mo, yung Aksyon Demokratiko naman, we stand by our candidates, no? Our official candidates for president is, of course, Mayor Isko Moreno Dumagoso, and our vice presidential candidate is Doc Willie Ong. We stand by them, and we will continue to push for them. Having said that, we cannot stop the groundswell for support for Mayor Isko Moreno just by himself. Ano? Kung gusto po ng iba't ibang mga kilala at malalaking political leaders sa Visayas, Mindanao o saan man parte ng Luzon at mga volunteer organizations na ipares siya kung kaninong vice-presidente, hindi naman po namin sila para pigilan. But Mayor Isko, dati naman na po niya pa sinasabi pagka may mga sorties kami, pinakikiusapan niya po lagi yung mga kababayan na huwag na silang paghiwalayin ni Doc Willie. Now, if there are events that push for a different vice presidential candidate, he also respects that event's agenda or what they are pushing for. But let me again put again in the middle of the conversation yung groundswell. Habang pong tumatagal kahit saan pumupunta si Mayor Isko, parami ang sumasama sa kanya at gusto siyang tulungan para maging Pangulo ng bansa.
Yes, well, there are two things fueling this. One is, of course, people noticed na parang wala si Dr. Willie Ong kasama sa Maguindanao. And then, something you just said, you know, cynical Filipinos will say that we cannot stop the groundswell is politicians speak for we're in fact encouraging this.
Hindi po, no? Again, yung yung non-presence po ni Doc Willie Ong, kasi nga po ang imbitasyon doon, narinig niyo naman po siguro sa interview with Governor Toto Mangundadatus, na sila ay para sa Isko Moreno at sa isa pang vice presidential candidate, ano? At yun po ay nirespeto ng ating partido kung yun po ang kanilang panawagan. Again, yung sinasabi po namin groundswell, yan po ay evidence for both our tandem, ano. Pag sila po ay may mga motorcades, kahit saan pumunta po si Mayor Isko at si Doc Willie, pag may motorcade sila o meron sila mga town hall meeting, nakita niyo naman yun sa Pangasinan kung gaano karaming tao o ilang libong tao ang sumalubong sa kanila at nanood ng kanilang sa mga rallies, ano. At sa iba't iba pang lugar sa Laguna, nagpunta sila, no, sa Navotas. Nakita po ninyo how were they received, no? So malinaw naman po na talaga pong ang pagtanggap kay Mayor Isko Moreno Dumagoso ay parami ng parami at palakas ng palakas kahit saan. At sabi nga ni Mayor Isko, sila nga yung aming silent majority.
Sige. Maraming salamat po, Mr. Ramel. That was Chairman Ernest Ramel of Aksyon Demokratiko. But how are other parties, especially those linked to the Dutertes, taking this so-called pairing of Isko Moreno and Sara Duterte? Gretch gives us their not-so-warm reaction. Diba, Gretch?
That's right, Robbie. It seems like it's going to be a tough task to secure these parties' endorsements, particularly ruling party PDP Labans. Presidential candidate Manny Pacquiao reminds Isko Moreno that he is still the head of PDP Laban, and so the party has to get his approval first. Moreno has been openly and actively seeking the PDP Laban endorsement after its other faction, led by Energy Secretary Alfonso Cusi, said it will endorse a presidential candidate that will continue Duterte's legacy programs.
Ako naman ang presidente ng PDP Laban. Kumbaga, ako ang presidente ng Laban, sa akin din yan dadaan lahat. Yung mga ganon. And then also, yung sa PROMDE, nagkaroon ng alliance ang PDP at saka PROMDE. No, pagdating ng panahon, tatawagin yan PDP PROMDE.
Lakas CMD meanwhile says it welcomes endorsements of and support for their VP bet Sara Duterte, but does not condone efforts of certain groups to pair Mayor Inday Sara with other presidential candidates. Lakas CMD, which Sara Duterte co-chairs, reiterates that its candidate for president remains to be Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Speaking of Marcos Jr., his camp maintains he was not avoiding handshakes during a campaign sortie in Caloocan, but was just shielding an injured hand. Calls for justice over the arrest of the red tag community doctor Natividad Castro continue to pour, with the Department of Health now urging the police to uphold Castro's right to due process. And some highlights from the NBA All-Star Game weekend, including a record-breaking output from Steph Curry. These big stories after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. The family of Dr. Nati Castro, who was arrested by the PNP, is confident that the charges against her will be dismissed.
The Health Department is asking authorities to allow due process and to handle Doc Nati's case properly. This as the PNP maintains that Castro has links to the communist movement. Jenny Dongon with this story.
After being arrested by the PNP AFP intelligence operatives in her home last week, community health and human rights advocate Dr. Maria Natividad Castro was found by her family in jail in Bayugan, Agusan del Sur. Menshi, one of Doc Nati's sisters, said about 10 to 15 police officers, most of whom were not in uniform, raided the home of Doc Nati and left with her without informing other family members where they would be taking her. She was reportedly involved in the kidnapping of a civilian active auxiliary member who was detained somewhere in Sibagat, Agusan del Sur. The CAA is the government-backed militia that is helping the military's anti-insurgency campaign. But the family's lawyer said this case was already junked years ago.
Nabasura na, una.
Kailan po?
Nung earlier, when the judge determined na walang basis.
Chief PNP General Jonardo Carlos defended the police operation that led to the arrest.
Kami, ang hawak ay ano yung pinag-utos ng korte, pinatupad, ibabalik namin sa korte para madesisyonan.
According to the PNP, Doc Nati is a member of the Central Committee and head of the National Health Bureau of the Communist Party of the Philippines. Doc Nati was the secretary of Karapatan Caraga chapter up until 2018, but her family insisted she is not a communist.
Hindi po talaga kasi she is living publicly. Hindi po siya nagtatago. Nag-renew pa nga po siya ng kanyang medical license nung last year lang po.
The Health Department reminded authorities to follow due process in handling of Doc Nati's case.
Lahat naman po tayo would be presumed innocent until proven otherwise. So antayin lang po natin yung proseso na sinasagawa ngayon para po makita po natin kung ano po ang kalalabasan.
Meanwhile, the Castro family is confident that the charges against the doctor will be dismissed. For News 5, Jenny Dongon, We Are One News.
Human Rights Commissioner Roberto Cadiz joins us tonight to talk about the alleged red tagging and the arrest of community doctor Dr. Nati Castro. Attorney Cadiz, welcome to The Big Story.
Thank you, Robbie, for having me.
Very quickly po, first, an update on Dr. Nati. Where is she now? Does she have access to her lawyers?
Yes, she has access. and not only to her lawyers but also to our investigators. We were able to interview her, and she was able to provide us useful information that will guide us on how to continue to watch over her rights
Okay.
and provide assistance to her.
Okay. Attorney Gary, speaking of your investigation, the police are saying they have a warrant for her arrest. Her lawyers are, however, on the other hand, they're saying that was the case that they're citing was already dismissed 2 years ago. What are you finding? What are some findings of the CHR at this point?
Well, regarding the the dismissal of the case 2 years or so ago, we don't know about that yet. Let us leave that to her lawyers to determine whether or not the case has already been dismissed. Our concern right now is the alleged violations in the context of her arrest, which we have observed and which was reported to us also by the accused herself and her family. So number one, she was arrested on a weekend. Actually, there is no, she can be arrested anytime, but really there is a Supreme Court advisory to the PNP and to the AFP that in effecting arrests as much as possible, executing them on weekends is discouraged because this deprives the accused of her right to immediately seek succor before the courts. Kasi kung weekend yan, sarado yung mga korte, wala kang tatakbuhan. Isa yun, no? Tapos, they did not show her and their family the warrant of arrest. They refused her her right to counsel, no? Pinagbawal, ayaw siyang patawagin sa mga abogado. They did not inform her of where and their family where she was being brought, and the arresting officers themselves refused to identify themselves and their designation. So, right out of the bat, we would say that these are red flags regarding the execution of the arrest warrant.
Opo. Attorney Caris, maraming salamat po. We will continue to discuss this case on the Chief, so we invite everybody to join us there.
Alex to the rescue. Actress and vlogger Alex Gonzaga defends her sister Tony Gonzaga from bashers. In a vlog with broadcaster Karen Davila, Alex says the older Gonzaga is equipped against bashing. She shares her sister has been bullied even at a young age, but Alex still laments at how Tony would divert the discussion whenever asked about how she's doing amid the criticisms. Tony has been put in the spotlight after she hosted the proclamation rally of the Uniteam ticket. Critics slammed her for introducing Representative Rodante Marcoleta, who opposed the franchise renewal of her home network, ABS-CBN. For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are on News.
Time for another quick break. When we return. Not avoiding handshakes, the Marcos camp released photos of Bongbong's injured wrist and urged supporters to be gentle with the candidate's arm. The Philippine government is working to assist Filipino domestic workers in Hong Kong who were sacked by their employers after testing positive for COVID-19. And a new record in NBA All-Star Game for the Golden State Warriors guard Stephen Curry, who scored 50 points for Team LeBron. These big stories after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. drew flack online after a video of him seemingly avoiding handshakes during a motorcade in Caloocan City went viral.
The Marcos camp was quick to clarify that Marcos was not avoiding handshakes, as was instead nursing a wound on his wrist. Mobile journalist Judy Baiza with the story.
What pandemic? Even with the health crisis around, crowds are always lively during campaign sorties. Officials have always reminded photo opportunities, handshakes to even hugs. With just 2 weeks into the campaign period, candidates have covered a wide ground in their campaign. Supporters are especially looking forward to motorcades and caravans. And this is where social distancing is hardly observed, if not ignored altogether. This girl in one of VP Lenny's sorties pushed herself up in VP's car to take a selfie. While earlier reprimanded, she was later on allowed. Mayor Isko Moreno, meanwhile, was thrown a turon. Moreno at one point even got his hand wounded. Good thing he has a doctor for a running mate.
Unang-una, konti pa lang Tapos malala na palala, lalo na yung kanang kamay niya.
And the latest to get a taste of the overeager crowd, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. In now viral video, internet users slammed Marcos Jr. for being a snob, as it looked that he was trying to avoid handshakes during a motorcade. But his camp belied such accusation. They say Marcos Jr. allegedly has a wound on his left wrist, prompting him to take back his hand whenever crowds try to reach for him. Even the camp had no idea how he got it.
Baka nga napisil o baka nakurot o baka nakalmot. At again, I don't have to explain it sapagkat kayo mismo, ikaw mismo ay nakakasaksi kung paano siya salubungin ng kanyang mga supporters.
But some critics pointed out that at least in the video, Marcos was pulling his right hand and not the wounded left hand. His camp's plea, avoid squeezing the arms of Marcos per now. Mobile journalist Julie Baiza, We Are One News.
In world news, close to 30 foreign domestic workers in Hong Kong contracted COVID-19 as the city-state battles a surge in infections. Some of the foreign domestic workers were sacked by employers and were forced to sleep on the streets after testing positive for COVID-19. Others were denied treatment by hospitals. OFW rights group Migrante International is urging the consulate, the Philippine consulate, to provide quarantine assistance to the overseas Filipino workers who lost their jobs. Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles says the Philippine Overseas Labor Office has provided 28 COVID-stricken migrant workers with food packs, hygiene kits, and power banks. The country's labor office in Hong Kong is also promising isolation centers for those infected, as well as $200 in financial aid for each COVID-positive OFW and another $200 for aftercare assistance post-recovery.
For the big story in sports, no better way to cap off the NBA All-Star Weekend in Cleveland than the intense match between Team LeBron and Team Durant. Team LeBron would come out victorious 163-160 after LeBron himself sacked a game-winning basket, giving him his 5th straight All-Star game win as team captain.
After the viral Chanel-branded candle, fashion icon and actress Heart Evangelista has once again made rounds on social media, this time for her Chanel hangers.
Netizens could not help but poke fun at it, leaving hilarious comments on her Instagram post. Heart's Instagram is truly a home for luxury brands. Recently, she posted her designer hangers with a caption, "Oh, Coco," on her account. And as expected, fans were quick to jump on it.
Several users commented, "Paluin mo ako." And pag ito pinampalo sa akin, branded ang pantal ko. Some even reminisced about their childhood, saying they would not have minded receiving punishments if these hangers were the ones used. The actress post has garnered more than 76,000 likes so far on the platform.
Pag lumaan niya na yan, no? Sana itapon na lang niya sa amin.
No, kahit paper bag.
Bebenta ko yun, no? NFT pa. Speaking of ginto sa hangers na yun, I got the chance to talk to Isko-Sara a while ago, and she brought with her trophy from the US Women's Open.
Okay.
And alam natin, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding her change in citizenship from Filipino to Japanese. And tomorrow, we will hear from her on how exactly she feels about that.
Sinabi naman niya kaagad na Filipino pa rin sa puso.
Oo. Tsaka meron din ginto dito bukas.
Ano pa?
May trophy darating dito.
Galing
ibang bansa.
Sige,
Malalaman niyo.
abangan
Abangan
natin
ninyo
lahat yan.
bukas.
No.
That wraps up today's Big Story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. We are One News. Have a good evening.